There's a story I once heard, and it's a very good story. It's about these twins. They're middle-aged men, Frank and Andy. Now, Andy is a drunk, and he's got a couple of kids, and they're lost somewhere, you know, the children of different women, and he sort of like lives in a flop house, and he's just, you know, he's living hand to mouth kind of thing. That's Andy. And Frank, on the other hand, Frank lives in a very, very nice house, you know, about 10,000 square feet, something like that. He's got a loving wife. He's got 4 children. They're about to go to college, you know, and they're they're just terrific kids, you know. He's just got his own business. He employs like 50 people. And he's a pillar of his community, and he's got a wide circle of friends, and yeah. You know, Andy, you know, he's a boozer, and let's call it what it is. He's a bit of a junkie, right? I mean, he likes his drugs, you know, he likes his booze, he likes his gambling, and he's just a bit of a disaster. And when he dies, which won't be far away, because though he's about 50, just like his twin brother, Frank, you know, Andy's going to pass away, and nobody's really going to remember him, you know, and a few people, in point of fact, will probably be relieved. The day Frank dies, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to genuinely mourn his passing. You know, starting with his wonderful family, his wife and kids. Now, these twins, they grew up together, and they were both the children of, Dwayne. I forget the name of the guy. Dwayne was like, he was a mean fuck. He was a drunk. He had a job now and again. He'd beat up his kids, beat up the wife, until finally he just left. And nobody ever heard from him ever again. And Frank and Andy's mother, well, she was a piece of work. She brought in a lot of different boyfriends over the years. Sometimes when she was bored, she liked to put out her cigarettes on the back of the kids' hands, because they were just, you know, because she was just bored. You know, she's just a mean woman. And she ended up hanging herself, and nobody showed up at the funeral, you know. And so, you know, you see this horrifying, background, the horrible family life that Frank and Andy had. And, you know, this shrink interviewed the twins. Now, both of them were 50 years old, and the shrink was very diligent and got all their information separately, you know. And finally, he asked the same question, the shrink asked the same question of both Frank and Andy. The shrink asked both men, why are you living the life that you're living? How come you have arrived at this point, right? And both men answered the exact same thing. They said, well, with parents like mine, how else could I turn out? See, everybody has a sob story. Everybody. Everybody has some terrific, horrible injustice that's been committed to them, you know, or some tragedy. They got run over by a bus, or they were, like in my case, as I said in the previous story time, I said that I was falsely accused of sexual assault and sexual harassment, and that it ruined my college experience. And for 3 years, I was openly called a rapist and, ostracized, just very blatantly. And that's my sob story. And I have a few other sob stories. I'm sure you do. Everybody has a sob story. Everybody has something horrible that happened to them, right? Now, but the culture that we're living in today, it prioritizes and in fact rewards people who have the worst sob story. Blacks, the blacks who live today were descendants of slaves. I'm talking about in the United States, of course. They are descendants of slaves, and that's their sob story. Boo hoo hoo, Their great-great-great-grandfather was a slave, right? And that's their sob story. Women, well, there's the patriarchy and the structural sexism, and that's their sob story, right? And everybody feels sorry for these people because of their sob story. and they cry. And well, the thing is, see, the society we're living in today privileges people with the worst sob story. And it's grossly unfair, of course. If you don't come from one of the approved minorities, you don't have a sob story for yourself. So, you're one of the oppressors, which is completely unfair. Some white Appalachian, some dirt poor farmer out in West Virginia or wherever, right? He's never oppressed anybody. He has been oppressed, and yet, he's the evil member of the patriarchy, and he gets no benefits because he doesn't have the right sob story. See? Whereas the black kid who grew up with a lawyer father and a doctor mother in some upper middle class neighborhood, well, he can get into an Ivy League school even though his test scores are, 150 points below the average. Even though he had crappy grades and, really didn't study very hard. But he gets to go to Harvard. Whereas the kid of the Appalachian farmer, who was a straight A student, worked his ass off, got perfect SATs, he doesn't get to go because he doesn't have the right sob story. See, in our society today, there's a great emphasis on sob stories, and a lot of people think that the worse their sob story, the better it is. But see, we're going through this period now historically, and it's going to last a while. It's going to last another decade or two at least, okay? But for your personal development, dwelling on your sob story is the worst thing that you can possibly do, okay? Now, I know this from experience, my own experience, and the experience of other people that I've seen, okay? Let me explain. See, I told you in a previous story time that I had a dreadful college experience through just bad luck, right? Bad luck and a very vindictive young woman, right? So, I had a shitty time in college. But what happened to me, about my own sob story, was that, see, it wasn't that I got suspended for a false allegation that was demonstrably untrue. It wasn't that I was ostracized for 3.5 years. No. That was actually the good thing, see? Because when I got suspended, I had to fend for myself, and I didn't have any money, I didn't have any contacts, I didn't even have a place to stay, and I fended for myself. And it gave me a self-confidence that I treasure more than anything. Then when I was in college and I was ostracized pretty brutally, right? Of course, at the time, I didn't feel very good about it, but now, I could give a shit about what anybody says about me. See? See, like on the YouTube, this guy, Bunty King, he made a shitpost video about me. It's not very funny. I'll link to it below so you can check it out. But he made a shitpost about me. See? My complaint about it is that it wasn't funny, and it didn't really parody me very well. It didn't do the multicam thing, like the cameras everywhere. It didn't do anything on that. It didn't parody, the way I speak. You see, in point of fact, what other verbal tick do I have? I have a bunch of them. But the point is, see, it didn't bother me. It was like a little 4-year-old kid, trying to beat me up, a grown man, It's funny, it's cute. Because I had it much worse, right? Psychologically speaking, right? I went into a ring and there were half a dozen heavyweight champions of the world beating the ever-living shit out of me on a daily basis. That was my experience in college. And so afterwards, now, people can say whatever the fuck they want about me. I could really care less. Because, see, it toughened me. The sob story in our current society encourages you to exploit the sob story to get everybody to feel sad for you. Oh, poor thing. Oh, this passive-aggressive bullshit, right? But see, the sob story that happens to you, and I'm sure you have a sob story, see, don't dwell on the sob story. Dwell on the talents, the strengths you had to develop to deal with the sob story. In my own case, where I was ostracized for 3.5 years fairly badly, it taught me an independence insofar as my thinking and my conception of myself. I know my flaws, I have them, and I'm very aware of them. I am not somebody who was psychologically beat up so much that now I sort of like float through the world thinking that I'm a perfect being. On the contrary, I'm very, very aware of my true flaws, of my true failures. But if somebody else, hits me up, even on anything, I exploited my sob story to develop a strength, is what I'm trying to say. And that's what you should do, see? Our current society encourages people to wallow in their sob story. Oh, poor me. Oh, it's so awful. Me. My sob story is so bad. Yeah, sure. Yes, it's very bad. But the thing is, see, if you wallow in your sob story, it's a little bit like picking on a scab. You keep on picking on it, it'll never heal. See? But if you develop the strength of character, the strength of will, to not scratch at the scab and control yourself, well, that strength of character, that strength of will, it develops into something useful. Okay? You see the metaphor I'm trying to say? The point I'm trying to make here. Everybody has a sob story, and it doesn't make you special. Okay? Your sob story, whatsoever it may be, it has happened to other people. You got hit by a bus, shit, 10,000 people are hit by a bus every day, You got struck by lightning, another 5,000 got hit every day, today, by lightning. Somewhere in India, some whole family got wiped out by a bolt of lightning out of the blue, See, your sob story is not unique, okay? And to try to earn value for yourself based on a sob story, now that's pretty low now, isn't it? You're trying to make people think that you're a good person or a better person or elevate you somehow by virtue of being a victim. Is that what you want? You want to be considered a passive victim of whatever fate throws your way? Is that the kind of person, the kind of man that you want to be considered as? See? Or do you want to be considered the kind of man who has something thrown his way, some horrible tragedy, and deals with it and handles it and gains something out of it, gains a strength of character that can be applied to the rest of his life? See? I'd be an awful man, a pathetic man rather, if I went on and on and on. Oh, I was victimized when I was a kid in college. I was victimized. Instead, I applied the strengths that were developed by my sob story. Because the sob story affected me, sure it does. It still does. But I used it to my advantage. Use your sob story to your advantage. Use the thing that victimized you, whatsoever it might have been. See? The characters I was telling you about at the beginning of this post, the twins, right? Frank and Andy. Andy allowed his miserable upbringing to bring him down and wreck his life. Frank, on the other hand, took the anger and sadness of his upbringing and used it as fuel to achieve something wonderful, a wonderful life full of love and happiness. You see? Be like Frank. Don't be like Andy. Be like Frank. Don't wallow in your misery. You're miserable, fine. Everybody is miserable. The difference is how you handle that misery.